Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode number 165 of the Debt Free Dad podcast. Today, we are taking your listener financial questions. Now, we asked these questions quite a while ago, or we asked you guys for these questions quite a while ago. As you guys know, we were on a break, as we talked about in last week's episode. But today, we are going to be going through those. We're going to be discussing how to stay motivated, where's the best way to keep your emergency fund, how to get a spouse on board, and so much more. Stay tuned.
You're listening to the Debt Free Dad podcast with Brad Nelson. Brad and his co-hosts experience the anxiety of living paycheck to paycheck before learning the fundamentals of financial security. They are now on a mission to empower regular people to pay off their debt for good and enjoy happier, less stressful lives. Keep listening for inspirational interviews, tips, tricks, and practical advice to gain financial freedom.
Hey, how's everyone doing today? You can find us on Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. Just search Brad Nelson, Debt Free Dad. And as always, welcome to today's show. And remember to get all the resources, show notes, and links for today's show. You can head over to balancesense.com/165. That's again, BALANCEDCENTS.com/165. So, guys, we got a lot of questions, a lot of good ones. And Chris, as you pointed out, every single one of these could be its own episode. So we are going to do our best to try to be as quick about answering these questions as we can be. And we'll see how many of these we can get through. We're going to kick it off first with Crystal. Crystal asks, I've been listening to your podcast, and I really want to make some steps or take some steps to get our family in a better place. We're so stressed all the time about money, but my spouse isn't as excited or as willing as I am. Shocking, right? They feel we won't be able to have any fun. So any tips that you guys can offer to change their mind? So guys, who wants to take a stab at this one first?
Oh my God, please put fun in your budget. Like, it's okay. As long as it's an option for you, add it in your budget. And if it's not quite there yet, once you make it, start to budget and make things happen and prioritize, you could always prioritize the fun a little bit later once you maybe make a little sacrifices now. But I had friends that were not willing to budget because her spouse was not okay that he couldn't buy the alcohol that he wanted for the backyard for the summertime. And I said, why can't he? Just put it in the budget. And as soon as that happened, they started paying off debt and they became debt free. So I'm like, wow, because it's okay to put some fun in your budget. And that's the way I look at it.
I think, there's one key to that though, I think is finding the agreement on what fun is. And I think it's okay that
you got a point.
Like if you're partners though, I think it's okay that I think it's 100% okay that you don't agree with what each other thinks is fun if it's for you as an individual. You got to keep that in mind. Like, that's the hard part. If you're like, sometimes you could be being too strict on your budget, too strict on your partner, and you could be saying like, oh, no, that you don't need that, or you shouldn't have. No. Just because you don't see the value in it doesn't mean that they see it, right? So you got to make sure that both partners are being addressed in the budget. I think that'll help tremendously. I think you're right.
Yeah, I think shared goals, communication, and then you've got to be willing to give up something, let your partner have something on their end. And then the more you're able to communicate about it and slowly develop those shared goals, it takes time. It's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah, no question. I think progress helps too, though, with this. And this is why I tell a lot of people when they're first getting started, because I see this a lot. I mean, sadly, it's probably more common than it is not, where the other partner doesn't want to do it. But I think progress really gets the unwilling partner motivated a little bit more, especially if you can throw them a little bit of a bone and they can have a little bit of what they want while you're getting out of debt. And then you can start showing them like over the next few months or even next 6 to 12 months as you're doing this, like, hey, check this out. This is where we started. This is where we're at now. We actually have a savings account. We're actually paying down debt. They might be more willing to sacrifice more than you think because they're actually like, wow, this actually is working and I'm seeing the value of it. But when they're first getting started, especially if they don't want to do it, as most people don't want to do it, they don't see the value in it. They don't see the value of sacrifice. They don't see the value of doing a budget because all they know is what they know, right? But once you start doing something different, you start getting some different results. I think that provides a lot of motivation. And I see that. So patience, I think, is key too. But you got to be willing to lose a few battles to win the overall war. I think that's the way I would look at it. Be okay losing some of the battles with your partner to get them on board, and overall you'll win, I think.
And then you can have more fun.
Yeah, absolutely, right? Absolutely.
Do you remember, I think it was when you interviewed Christina, it's been a couple of years, but she used to listen to the podcast and the live meetups out loud with her husband just in the area. And as he started to kind of sit there and listen, he kind of got on board over time too.
Yeah. You're talking about Christina Sutsui Tharp. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Yep. Same. It's a perfect example of just, listening to the information without, what do they call that? Subliminal messaging. That's I love that one. All right. The next one is Doug. Doug says, do you guys prefer the debt snowball or the debt avalanche method? He says, to me, it makes sense to focus on the highest interest rate and using the avalanche method. So thoughts on this one, guys?
We get this all the time.
We do all the time. Well, I think it's a great debate in the getting out of debt. You know, we talked about this on an episode 2. I think it was one of the first episodes we did. Maybe I think it was episode 7, like one of the first ones we did. Don't judge us on that, by the way. We were new. But, you can go check that one out. We do talk about this in great depth there. But what are your guys' thoughts? I mean, all of us have had great success in getting out of debt. What are your guys' thoughts on?
I use the debt snowball method. The reason behind it and the argument that was made is you want those quick victories, so that, like you said, Brad, then you feel like you're getting somewhere. You get the traction going. So I think for most people, in most cases, the smallest debt is something that can be paid off fairly quickly, and then you roll those funds into the next one. And there's the old saying: if you were going by mathematics, you probably wouldn't be in credit card debt and all the different debt that you're in to begin with. So set that aside. Just try to get a couple quick victories. That's why I like the debt snowball.
Yeah.
It's hard though for the logical, it depends on how your brain works, right? Like I'm so logical and just is that a personality? And I'm like, to me, for the longest time, I thought avalanche would be the smarter way to go. But once I started the debt snowball, I loved it because I love the small wins. We just started paying stuff off slowly. And I don't think we would have had the success we did had we gone the other way.
Yeah. Well, I think you're not wrong though when you say it is mathematically it is the smarter way to do it. You will save money using the avalanche method, but as Chris kind of pointed out, as you said, I think sometimes we underestimate the value of small wins. And let's say hypothetically, you're comparing the two, whether or not you do the avalanche or the snowball, and let's say you choose the avalanche, and your first debt is, let's say, pretty sizable. Let's say it's $5,000, and the credit card interest on that is maybe 19, 20%, maybe even 29%, depending on what kind of credit card it is. And let's say you're living just paycheck to paycheck, and really ultimately all you can afford is just to maybe make that minimum payment, maybe a little bit more. I mean, it's going to take you a long time to check off that first credit card or that first debt if that's the highest interest rate for you. And what's going to happen? You're going to lose steam and you're going to lose motivation because you're not going to feel like you're really making that much progress, right? Whereas opposed to, like you said, Chris, it's, if let's say you have a $150 credit card, it's like some, cheapo, maybe Amazon or Target or, something like that, where you just have a little bit on it and you can attack that and get it paid off. That check mark, that check, it feels amazing to get one taken care of, right? Like this is actually working, and that only encourages you to keep moving forward. I will say,
listen,
though,
if
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say is let's say you get down to where you have 2 left on the list and they're very similar in balance. If you want to reorder them and go by the one that's the highest interest rate, at that point, you've proven to yourself you can do it.
Yeah.
All right. The smart thing is, it's smart mathematically to do the avalanche, but smart doesn't help you make progress. It's the small victories. It's the small wins, proving to yourself that you can do it. That's where the real value of the debt snowball is. But you get later into it and you want to switch it around, I don't think anybody at that point is going to beat you up for it.
Yeah.
Because you're sort of proven to yourself that you can do it.
Right. Well, I think there's room for a hybrid though of it too. Like for instance, if you let's say like right now as we're recording this, it's it's kind of some people are still getting refunds, I would imagine, but It's end of March, and you're having people get these large, refunds. In that case, it could make sense to do a hybrid of it rather than focus on the debt snowball. It might make sense to focus on one that has a higher interest rate to save yourself more money and just pay that off or get those things paid down, a good chunk, so you're not sending so much money to interest. I think, you can definitely look at that when you get in lump sums of cash. You can do a hybrid model. You still do the debt snowball, but then flip them around to pay down some of those. Also, I think sometimes, and not in every case, it also can make sense from a cash flow standpoint when you get a lump sum too. Like if you're finding that you're living paycheck to paycheck every single month and like some of these minimum payments are pretty significant, like it may not be interest driven, but it's just your minimum payment is higher. It may not always be credit cards or whatever it might be. In those cases too, it could make sense to pick on some of those higher minimum payments and get those paid off to free up cash flow every month moving forward to ease some financial stress. That also helps you with things that come up like our emergencies. Like for instance, if you have a $300 minimum payment on a debt and you can get that paid off, you've now given your cash flow every month moving forward $300 extra. Whereas opposed to if an emergency comes up, instead of sending that money to $300 worth of extra debt on the debt snowball, you could keep that money and fund your emergency without going further into debt. So there are some different strategies you can get into when you get lump sums of cash. But if we're talking just monthly normal strategy, I'm all day debt snowball. I think it's the best way.
Yeah. I know when I was getting into debt, I had actually taken my credit cards and with a Sharpie marker, I had written what the interest rate was on the front. And I would always use the one that had the lowest until it was maxed out. And then I would take the next one. So the ones with the lower interest were actually probably my higher balances. And then when I was getting out of debt, I still am, but when I got like my quarterly bonus or something from work and I was looking at which debt to pay off, I was looking at, well, if I pay off my student loan, I can't charge that back up again. That one will be done forever versus if it was the same amount on a credit card, I would pay off the student loan because I'm like, well, that just immediately goes away forever. No more minimum payment. And that just made sense at the time. But yeah, I definitely do the snowball just because those little wins motivate me for sure.
Yeah. I always like to say this when this question comes up. It's like, okay, you're in debt. Did you use math to get yourself into that? Because if you did, you would never be there, right? You didn't use math to get in. All of a sudden, yeah. You're like a math nerd now, right? All of a sudden,
I've discovered math.
Yeah,
it's
right.
like, where was this my whole life?
Yeah, math was definitely not a part of my financial plan when I was in debt.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, between these two, I think whichever one you're going to stick to is the one, at least from my perspective. I think what we generally tell people is the snowball method because it is overall the thing people stick to, right? I know people who are like, I'm going to stop eating sugar, and they stop eating sugar and then they just never eat sugar again and they just do it. But most people don't function that way. So I think if you are the type of person that is going to go for this and you can stick to it and you're not going to fall off the bandwagon and you can stick to paying down a large debt and that is motivating for you, then yeah, use the avalanche method. But I think most people are going to be more wired for those quick wins and just to see some progress, because I think a lot of us just don't have it in us. One of our biggest credit cards was like $15,000. That would have taken us forever to pay that off initially, and we probably would have been like, well, we're not doing this after a couple months. So
right, yeah, I think we even said it.
Mathematically, a debt snowball may take you longer, but you're more likely to finish. And so you have to ask yourself, would I rather be finished or fall off the bandwagon?
Yeah.
Right. And I think just the debt snowball is going to help you finish. That's I think the important thing to remember.
Yeah. And to piggyback on that, Chris, there's actually studies that they've done that show and prove what you just said, that the debt snowball has been proven to be the most successful method because it actually, most people finish that because of the psychological side of it.
Right.
Yep. All right. Next question. Linda. She says, I wrote down all my debts. With my current income, my smallest debt will take at least 16 to 18 months to get paid off. Is this normal? And how the heck do you stay motivated? Right? So, it's a good question. So is it normal? Here's the thing. There's nothing's really normal. Everyone's situation is different. So is it normal that it's going to take you that long? It really kind of just depends on each person's individual financial situation. I would question your budget and see what ways you can speed it up. What are some things that you could sacrifice on? What are some ways that you could increase income? Those are definitely going to be some things. But also, one thing I learned in getting out of debt, yes, it takes a while to get out of debt, but as you get momentum on your side and you start getting the wins, things start to get moving faster than you originally predict, as long as you're consistent. That's the key. Like, you can't be on the plan and then off the plan, on the plan and then off the plan, and expect consistency to be on your side. It's not going to work that way. But if you're consistent with it and you're saying 16, 18 months, I'd be willing to bet if you're going at this like really hard with intensity and you want to get this stuff paid off, I'd be willing to bet you probably pay it off much faster. But when you're first looking at it, it's a pretty daunting thing. And that's why I think, especially with these longer or these bigger debts, it's really important to have a tracking system. And Linda, I know you're inside roots, but this is why we give people trackers, stickers, track everything, because you want to see that you're making progress, even though you're not officially able to check it off, right? So anything you can do to remind yourself that you are making progress, that you are paying it down, that you are chipping it away, are all things that can help you stay motivated and getting it completed.
Yeah, seeing that number
And
every time I do my monthly total, I'm just like, how have I paid off $105,050? I like that number still seems ridiculous to me, and that's my number.
Because it
as
is
of today.
ridiculous. That's an outstanding achievement. Think about it.
It's also taken almost 5 years in July.
Right.
It'll be 5 years, but
Yeah.
I mean, I was just doing the work and doing the steps, and I wasn't adding it up necessarily and going, oh, I've done this already. It's like when I see that, I'm like, what? Like, this is insane. And seeing how the other number, the debt that I owe, is going down faster and faster, I'm seeing that snowball getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
And I think on the front
I
end
would say this.
too, I think on the front end, you tend to overestimate like the time involved, right? I mean, I know like when we added all ours up, it was like, oh my gosh, this is going to take us forever. But I think we've all had moments in our lives where it's like, man, I can't believe 5 years has passed already. That was 5 years ago. And that's like how it feels after we got out of debt. It felt like forever when we started, and now it's behind us. And I'm like, time's going to pass no matter what. So 5 years from now, you could either be potentially out of debt, or 5 years from now, you can be still going, oh, we should maybe still get out of debt. Like, I think it's just in the beginning, it's just so daunting. But at the end, when it's over, like the 5 years for you, Katie, I mean, yeah, it's 5 years. And while you're going through it, it's terrible. But it's also, I think now you can look back at it and be like, man, it's already been 5 years. It goes by pretty fast in relative terms, I guess, once you're on the other side of it.
Yep.
And real quickly, this is not specifically an answer to Linda, because I don't know Linda's situation, but for the Lindas of the world out there who maybe are in the same situation where you write it down, sometimes it's Brad, you hit on this in the previous answer. Sometimes the reason you can't get a lot of traction is because you've got one debt that eats up so much of that debt snowball, i.e. a car.
Yeah.
That sometimes you may have to address that situation first to free up that. Right. And yes, that might mean selling or getting rid of that car. And again, this is not a specific answer to Linda, but for those of you out there, that's something you might want to look at is, can I free up the cash flow a different way and possibly eliminate one of those higher debts, kind of all in one thing, and just one thing to look at.
Yeah, I will say that's one of the things that helped us a lot. We got rid of a car payment when we were first getting out. It was about $500 car payment. We got rid of that, and plus we cut out cable. And between the two of those, that added almost $700 to our budget to pay down debt. Those are, that's a huge amount of money every month that we didn't have. And so by making a change, making that sacrifice, it allowed that whole process to just go that much faster, for sure. Yeah, that's a great point. Lyra says she's having a problem too, staying motivated. She says, I lost my mojo, and the biggest thing I struggle with is work and home life balance. I'm working so much and focused on making the money to pay off the debt. My home and my relationships are beginning to suffer. Oof, this is a good one. Because it's all about finding that balance, right? And that's,
I don't know. I think balance is BS.
Well, I agree. I think it is, but I
don't think your relationships should suffer.
Correct.
Right. But I don't think there's such thing as balance either. And I think sometimes you're going to have more work sometimes you're going to have more family and relationships time. Like it's got a give and take. And maybe that'll slow down paying off your debt. But
Yep.
if you're okay with that because you're getting the relationship and you're not suffering from the relationship and the home life, then you might want to look at that a little bit, right? I think motivation comes from all of the people around you, not just the paying down of the numbers and the debt and the spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm. And I would just maybe take a step back from it and are you pushing too hard? You know what I mean? And we felt this at some times where it was like we had to take a step and be like, you know what? We're gonna just go do some stuff. We're gonna take a little vacation. You know, we're gonna pay cash for it and do those things. But there were times, I think there's a lot of this mentality of just like I gotta like cut everything out and live on the bare minimum, and everyone's gonna suffer. And it's like we just could not do that. And every time we tried, because we want to get out of debt as quick, we want to ease the pain as fast as possible. So it's like I can do all this in 2 years, you know, instead of maybe 4 years. But the 2 years is going to be miserable and you're pushing. So that's just what I would say is like, are you putting so much pressure on it to have it done in such a short amount of time? And is that absolutely necessary? You know, if you lengthen that even 6 months or 12 months, but it takes the pressure off and you still do all the things you're supposed to be doing and you're doing all the right things, but you're not pushing so hard.
Yeah.
That'd just be something I would be looking at.
Yeah. The other thing I would consider here too, I think, is just the buy-in from the home life. You know, I think there might be some people that aren't on the same page, you know, whether it be your kids or your partner or whatever. But I think, you know, sitting down and maybe having, you know, just a family meeting about, hey, what are, well, obviously it starts with a couple first. Don't get your kids involved yet, right? But, you know, get on the same page with your partner. Like, what does it mean to sacrifice our time to work more now so we can get to this point sooner, right? What does that look like? What does it look like for you? What does it look like for me? And are we willing, or what are we willing to do to get there? And in some cases, it's kind of like what we answered in the previous question with getting people on the same page or getting them on board, is that, you know, there's just not enough buy-in from one of the partners possibly of what we're doing or why we're working towards it. So, you know, fine-tuning that why in the house of why you want to do this, why do you want to put in the work, what's it going to mean in the next X amount of months if we're willing to sacrifice. And I just had a coaching call about this. It was very similar. And this person said that they were willing to put in the extra time, but their spouse or their partner was having a hard time with it, but it was going to essentially almost triple the amount of time that it was going to take for them to get out of debt if they weren't willing to put in the extra hours. And I said, I would really just, you know, as long as you're willing to put in the work, I would just really work with them on saying, hey, this is just a short period of time. And what can we do kind of along the way to kind of ease that pain so we can just get there that much sooner, right? And maybe you don't make it a year. Maybe instead it's just 18 months. And maybe you guys just find kind of a meet in the middle time, you know, as opposed to it being 3 years or just 1 year, right? You just meet in the middle of where that could be. So I think sometimes it can just be buy-in and just taking the time to get everyone on the same page. And you might find that home life doesn't suffer as much when you guys have a unified goal and you're working towards something. And that was very much something that happened in our house with my wife and us and our kids. And it was not always easy. It was not always easy, even being debt-free and running our businesses. It was sacrifice. But those moments where I would be with my kids because my wife was out doing in-home parties and stuff, especially in January, February, March, and April when it was the busiest time of year, you know, it's easy to sit back and say, oh, I don't want to do this again. But in the back of my mind, I knew we were working towards something. Like we had a goal, right? So I was willing to sacrifice more, do more, because I knew that there was a bigger reason for it. There was a bigger purpose behind it. It wasn't just because, well, I gotta, you know, I'm always the one hanging out with the kids all the time while she's working, right? No. Okay, I will admit, sometimes there was that attitude. but most of the time, you know, I knew that there was a bigger reason on why we were doing what we were doing and where we were going. So you might want to work on that. Yep. All right, Daniel.
It can be,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Katie. Yep.
I was just going to say, sometimes it's just a matter of swapping out some things too. Like if you always go out for pizza, that gets expensive. So you could have a pizza night at home and probably save quite a bit of money and time and gas and all of that. Play a board game instead of going out to the movies or something like that. Just there are alternatives. You just kind of have to be a little creative sometime when it comes to working with the budget and maybe getting them on board too.
Daniel says, how much is too much money to keep at a home for an emergency fund? What are some good avenues to place your emergency fund in, and where it can gain interest or be easily accessible for a possible emergency? So this is an interesting question. Now, I don't keep my emergency fund at my house. I actually don't carry much cash, to be honest with you, at all. My emergency fund is just at my bank, and I have it split into actually 2 different bank accounts. I have one that's a local bank here that I can access quickly if I need to. It's not a big amount of money, but it's enough to, cover unexpected things where I need to access cash that day or maybe next day. And then my other one is just in a high yield savings account, which, by the way, is getting a really nice interest rate right now, which is nice. But that one is in a high yield savings account that's at an internet bank. I've mentioned that bank before, Ally Bank. We don't make any money from Ally, but Ally, if you want to make some money, hey, come reach out to us. We'll be happy to partner with you guys. But I love Ally Bank. I think they've got some great tools there, especially when it comes to like digital envelopes and buckets and a lot of cool things that they do now. But that's where I keep that side of the emergency fund. Now, I do have Roots members that do keep their cash in a safe, so that's what they like. So that's just kind of what I do, though.
I think it depends what you're comfortable with, like how much money you're comfortable with having in your house. Me personally, I don't keep much in my house at all.
Yeah.
So I think it comes down to what you're comfortable with. But I'm with like you, Brad. I love my online bank. If you're in Canada, I also don't make money on this, but EQ Bank, great savings, and it's really quick to e-transfer between bank accounts if you need the money.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to think of an emergency fund not as a wealth building tool, not as a retirement plan.
Yep.
It's insurance, and insurance costs you money. And if you never use the insurance, you're still out the money. Think of the lost interest that you don't earn as sort of being like insurance. Yeah, I could have made some money if I had it here, I had it there, but that's not the purpose of the emergency fund. That's having it readily available when you need it. It's not, you don't want to put it at risk. Of course, with most bank accounts, there's savings accounts, there's no risk. But the point is don't think about I've got to make money with it. It's not a wealth building tool. It's there for when you need it. So yeah, you miss out on 1 or 2% because you don't have it in a high yield interest rate. It's okay. It's not the end of the world.
Right.
It's there when you need it, and that's the purpose of it.
Yeah, especially if you're just getting started too, Chris, I think that's a good point. Like, our recommendation is $1,000 to $3,000 for your starter, for your first emergency fund. In that case, local bank, credit union, fine. We're not, you're getting really too far down the road, I think, if you're still working your way out of debt. These are, these interest questions and things like that are for more like bigger savings accounts and when you're kind of getting to those next steps and those next levels. But all things like, hey, to keep like, I want to get to that level. These are cool things, cool questions. I can't wait to start working on for sure.
Just remember, if it's an account like you're saving up to put down payment on a house or something, it does have to be in a bank account. It can't just be a pile of cash that you bring into the bank. They usually need to have some kind of record of that.
Yeah,
asset.
where did the money come from?
Right.
Don't worry about it.
And it's not right there at home. Yeah, money that's right there at home is easy to spend on pizza and other things. So having it in a bank account as opposed to home, I think, is a smarter way to go. And I always say keep it close enough that you can get to it, but not close enough that it's easy to get to it. If that sort of makes sense.
Yeah,
there's a little bit of a, you are your own worst financial enemy. So put a little bit of a barrier in there so that it's not easy to go to the same bank, use a different bank. And it's a little out of the way, but if it's really an emergency, you can get to it. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a home break in, 8-9 years ago now. And ever since then, no way. I put it all in the bank. Like that was enough for me. So.
Just funny. My wife had that happen to her when they were younger too. So to this day, we just always laugh because anytime anybody comes over to do work, like we're doing some home remodeling right now, so we have contractors in. I mean, if there's like $3 sitting on the counter, she's like, "Make sure we put all that away. Put it all, hide it. Put it all." I'm just like, no one's gonna steal anything, but she 100% like, yeah. So we don't keep money at the house either.
Yeah. It changes you. Home break-in is so, it's so gross. Ugh.
Yep.
All right. Last question for the show. Samantha says, love the podcast, guys. If there was one thing, if there's one thing you could do different, I forgot I put this one in here for one thing you could do different about your finances, knowing what you know now, what would it be? Who wants to go first?
I would have never.
I would just
signed
say
up
start
for a
earlier.
credit card in college. Just walk past the guy, give free T-shirts. Just keep going and keep your money in your pocket.
And I would say start early. And if I could have a second one, just read everything on the subject. Be a sponge. Learn as much as you can, particularly if you're starting now with tools like Roots and this podcast and many other podcasts and plenty of books that are out there. Absorb as much as you can.
I would have totally taken my mom up on her offer when she said, if you pay half of your school, start saving now, pay half of your college, I'll pay the other half, instead of coming out with a ton of debt, because I didn't and she paid nothing.
Yeah, for me, I mean, mine's probably just more like personal in the fact that if I could go back, I spent a lot of my earlier years in my life trying to prove to everybody that I was successful. And that's where all my spending, it was everything I bought was for other people's opinions, and everything I had was for other people's opinions. And it's just like, once you wisen up a little bit that no one gives a crap about you think they do, but nobody cares. And it's like, when you realize that, it's like, I just wish I, would have learned that earlier in life, that, because that just everything I had was not for us.
Yeah. These are all good, man. These are all kind of like what I would say. I don't know. I think saving would be the biggest one. Obviously, staying out of debt is so important, but man, just the whole magicalness, like, is magicalness a word? Magicalness.
It is today.
It should be right now. It is right now. Just the magic of compound interest, right? Even if I didn't get myself out of debt, if I would have just been willing to commit to saving a portion of my income so early. I started working. Seriously, I started working at 15, but I was even working prior to that. Doing side jobs even as young as like 12 and 13 years old. Even just putting man, what a difference that could have made, knowing what I know now. And that's why I always talk, when we talk about savings, and like in our savings module, I always talk about like, hey, instead of buying your kids more stuff, what if instead you invested $75 a month for them from the age of 0 or at whatever age they're at right now until they're 18, and you just teach them, like, all you gotta do is just keep putting that $75 in there every single month. You will pretty much make your kids a millionaire by the time they retire, just with that little bit amount of money. And, you think about all the stuff that we give our kids and the things, and it's like, $75 at the end of the day isn't a whole heck of a lot when you start taking away some of those extra things you might give them, but what a difference that can make for you, not only for them, but just your whole family tree, and being able to pass that down to their own kids and things, man. Awesome stuff. So the Totally Awesome Debt Freedom Planner is helping so many people make consistent progress with their finances. Whether that be building emergency funds, paying down bills, budgeting, tracking paydays, saving up for larger purchases, goal planning, and planning for those irregular yearly expenses that always seem to catch you by surprise. Now, the Debt Freedom Planner will help you take the stress out of managing your money. And if the thought is running through your mind, hey, I just need to have a simple tool to get my finances together, this planner is perfect for you. Head over to therealdebtfreedad.com, click on the Debt Freedom Planner in the menu at the top of the page, and order your Debt Freedom Planner today.
Let's talk about that, baby. Let's talk about your money. Let's talk about all the good things, all the bad things that make me. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that.
And that now means it's time for the celebrations of the show. First, we have Sonia Coons. After 8 months, this past month was my best and first month that I am under budget. I did have a few categories which were over, but between others under and shifting a few things around, I kept it all in line. So happy.
Yeah,
yay!
That is awesome, Sonia. Congratulations. She's been working hard. She started in early August. Has already made some tremendous progress. That's incredible. Sandy Jarrett, made my final payment on a 401k loan One more debt finally paid off. Sandy, congratulations. That's awesome.
And Brenda Feldhauer, next month's budget is done.
There you go. Yep. Love it.
Jonathan James says he's been reading people's posts on Roots, and it has helped him to stay financially conscious.
Yeah, I love that.
Jennifer Foster, I closed on my house today. Closing was at noon. My first mortgage payment is due April 1st. I definitely could not have done this without Roots. I'm sending out another payment today to pay off yet another credit card in full. Yay.
Yeah,
Woo-hoo.
that is awesome, Jennifer.
Nice.
Congratulations to you, and great job to all of you guys who are working your way out of debt. And as you guys know, if you're just getting started with our podcast, or maybe you've been listening for some time and you're interested in how you can get started on the road to financial freedom, go over to our website at balancesense.com and sign up for our free Life Without Payments workshop, where I'm going to show you the first steps that have helped tens of thousands of people just like you and I kick financial stress and worry for good.
Thanks for listening to the Debt Free Dad podcast. Connect with us on Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram at Brad Nelson Debt Free Dad. If you found value in today's episode, please leave a rating and review. We so appreciate it. For resources, show notes, and links mentioned in today's show, visit balancedsense.com. That's balancedsense, CENTS.com. Catch you next week.